OpenAI reached 1 billion active users, twice as fast as Facebook.
Cost per token is only one indicator, right? It's like the cost per task to actually accomplish something is much more important.
Only 0.3% of the world population uses like a $20 plan.
You need to be very careful with context engineering.
It does seem like in a lot of tasks it's going backwards, and it's probably because they are benchmarking. I saw recently a paper that was saying, basically it was analyzing how our, humans, like, scientists or geniuses like Einstein, right, came up with some new solutions, right, like others couldn't come up with until then. So, they had all of this information that maybe others had as well, access to that information, but they were able to come up with those solutions. And it seems, and why AI can't really do that right now, or at least until maybe GPT-6, right? We'll have to see, because it seems to like do some of those like math, problems that couldn't be done before by humans. Anyways, so it seems that us humans at least make these logical jumps like into new territory. So you have all of this information, but in order to come up with like a novel idea that actually solves what you're trying to solve, you need to jump much farther away from that to come up with, like maybe like an extreme analogy or something, right? Like, so, but that's what it was calling, like a logical jump, I think was the expression. So that's interesting. Like the AI can't do that. You're feeding it that context and it works within that context, right? You can't think of something like completely, out of the blue, So
it also feels like it becomes restrained by the context, right? But like you give it, if you give it a lot of details on a project, for example, it feels that it thinks that it needs to stay inside of the constraints of your context and not go outside of it. But you do it for inspiration, not to limit it. So yeah, you need to be very careful with context engineering.
We still need to optimize them a lot more, like fine tune them, like much deeper, like 10 times deeper or more. Because the idea with context engineering was, AI has access to like all of the world's information, right? But you actually wanted to like use only the specific information to solve this problem. Like let's say it's a, copywriting problem and you only want to use this copywriting style or framework from this copywriting book, right? You're not just telling you like use all of the world's copyright information to, right? You just wanted to use that, right? So once you do that, once you feed it that context, like that's by design, right? To focus on that. But it's also a problem, right? For like more complex problems that you want to solve.
I also wonder if you will ever go back to like fine-tuning models, because right now everything is about context engineering, prompting, and just kind of trying to push it in a certain direction. And fine-tuning kind of went away over the last year or two. I wonder if we go back to it. So we actually feed it the good examples of copywriting, for example, right? Like that you actually give it the style that you want and you fine-tune the model on 500 examples, and it becomes better at copywriting because it knows exactly what you're looking for. That would be my hope.
I think this is some strategy that some new like labs are doing, right? To be able to compete with these like general huge AI labs like OpenAI and Anthropic. I think it was Mistral, no, that recently open sourced a new model, and they were saying they want to like fine tune to certain like industries or something.
I'm not sure if it was Mistral, but there is the other company.
There was another one, like European one, I think.
I think there's the US one. One of the I think co-founders maybe of OpenAI started a company. I know the model is named Tinker. I'm thinking about the name.
Was it Thinking? It wasn't Thinking Machines. No.
Thinking Machines. Yes,
okay.
That's the one. So I think they open source their model and they actually have platform for fine tuning it.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels like especially the latest models are lacking that, especially on the copywriting, like you mentioned. They seem to be getting worse, not better.
No, it's definitely getting worse. It's getting more confused, repeating itself, and the direction it's going.
And saying nonsensical phrases, right? Like that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Or we are getting better at, copy and everything else, and now we just see it. That's the other possibility.
I don't think so. No, because I remember being quite impressed with some of the copy generally. Like, I was comparing a lot of like all the major models before for some copy things, and one of them, would give me like 80% of them were like usable, right? And others were like 50% or 30%. So I was impressed with, the ones that were giving me like much higher quality output. And now like I feel like the vast majority of it is bad for many models.
Honestly, now I feel like I can just do the first draft by myself and then have the AI built on top of it. So I give it like specific direction that, like, let's say on a website that you want specific section to speak in a certain perspective, then you do the first draft that it's supposed to be so sort of crappy. And then you give it to AI and like, okay, this is the baseline. Let's work from there instead of asking AI to figure it out, how to structure it. So it's kind of not prompting, but again, giving it an example.
Yeah, and you need to be very, very specific. There was this discussion before about taste, right? Like human taste, which is kind of like a nebulous, expression. Like you don't really know what it means. But I think it means you need a vision, like a very specific vision for how the output should look like, right? So if you want like a very specific style of copy, like you need to feed it that like reference or tell it to use that framework, right? And write it that way. And you still need to fine tune it after, like you still need to optimize. You'll not be happy with like one prompt, output.
Yeah, and maybe that's the hard part. That like it's so hard to encode your preferences and direction into plain English. That there is like so many small nuances that you think it's obvious, but it's not, right? And you need to just figure out how to encode it into written prompts. And it's harder than it seemed.
I mean, good thing we're getting telepathy and we'll be able to communicate with our minds.
Yeah, we don't have to talk to our computer anymore. That's going to be a much nicer life. You can just think about it.
Everyone will be like daydreaming, walking on the street and thinking about.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about what that's going to do to people. You've seen what it does. When you spend the whole day on social media, it doesn't lead to anything good. When you spend your whole day talking to AI chatbot, it doesn't lead to anything good. Yeah. So telepathy, I feel like it's going to be the trifecta here.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention about this thing with the constraining the model and the context engineering, maybe it is the fault with the way the foundational technology works, like transformers, right? It's very statistics based, right? Everything. So that's why it's much harder for it to make those logical jumps, because it's not, us as humans, we may make decisions that have like a 5% chance to work, right? And it still may be like the best decision you can make, or the best, highest reward to risk decision. But an AI may not think like that, right? It just thinks like, what's the safest, decision, safest output.
Maybe the key will be having a few AI agents do a certain task, and one of them is the normal conservative one, and then you have a few who are looking for outliers, who are ones. Yeah, exactly, like the crazy one who want to go for something that has very low probability of success, but just maybe it could work out. I was also thinking like, mental models, right? For a human being, like if you have a problem and you build mental models from your past experiences or you just learn them, like you can think about it in better ways, and then you can come up with better outcomes just because you have the tool for your brain to think about certain problems. So maybe we need some alternative for AI as well. Teach it to think in a certain way so it can solve the task at hand.
Yeah, I guess it's more of a UX issue then. It's something that needs to happen to make it easy for us as humans to like select between these modes, or in some way automatic, but still in the way you talk to the AI, right? And it knows to choose those modes. And I wanted to mention earlier something I'm noticing, when building these agent workflows. So it takes a lot of work, like you said, to like optimize and fine tune and like until you get that output that you want. But once you do that, like it can learn it. Like it can learn it pretty well, maybe like within 95%, at least. And you, like as a skill, right? You can learn it as a skill. And then you can apply it pretty easily to new work that you still want done like that, like exactly like that, or in that style, right? So I find that works pretty well, and it's still useful. Like even if it takes you, 20 hours to like build a workflow and like optimize it and get the result you want. But then after that, if you can do like 10, 20, 50 of those things that you need to do, right? Anyway, like you're still getting an ROI from that, right?
But you still need the human supervision and human in the loop.
You still need to verify at the end.
Right. Because there's the thing with accuracy, right? Even if you had 99% accuracy, that means like 1 out of 100 is going to be a failure. So if you fully automate the process, and especially if it's a task that's being done on scale, and it runs 10,000 times a day, you're going to have a lot of things that go wrong every single day. And that's the challenge with the accuracy.
Depends how high the stakes are. So what I mean here, for example, if you just want to build some ads, right? And like 1 out of 10 will be kind of nonsense. I mean, that's fine, because if you just put those ads in like an ad set or two, Facebook will just ignore that one anyway, so will not spend more than a couple of dollars. So like it's very low stakes. That error is like low stakes, so it doesn't matter.
Because there's that additional verification layer, right? That like the meta algorithm decides what works and what doesn't.
Yes.
So if it's complete nonsense, that's the filter for you.
Yeah. And I'm still thinking about this, like for us to build those like judge models. I haven't found a way yet to like build one of these of my own, right? I mean, I can build this like mixture of agents, panels with an acting judge and that sort of thing. I don't feel it's quite what I want, right? Like we need like an external, maybe like a separate agent, right? That's specifically built. But even then it would have to be like a specialist in that task in order to judge it. So you have to teach it, you have to build the workflow first, optimize it, spend all of that time, make it work, 90%, and then build a judge agent to be able to analyze that and get it to 100%.
Because right now you're asking the same model to evaluate its own work, right? So of course he's going to like it. Like that's the problem with this whole flow. Like if it has the same quirks and issues, then it's going to come up with like a good ranking of the output because it has the same underlying issues.
Yeah, not necessarily the model, because I can use different models. Maybe that helps. It does help a little bit, but not in the way I would expect or I want. So I think you need basically like different skills. Like you need a different skill and maybe like a different harness, but at least a different skill for the judge to be able to analyze it.
Maybe that would be like a good use case for fine-tuned model, that it's like really tied to what the outcome is expected to be. But LLM as a judge, yeah, still struggling with that.
Yeah, the model, at least the judge model, would have to be fed the outcome data, right? So we can learn and say, oh, we need more of this, right? So if this first model, outputs something, this model can say, no, you need to correct it in this way and do more of this. But maybe both of them need the data, right? In order to build from scratch based on that.
I mean, it's always a challenge if you hire an intern to do a task and then you ask the intern to evaluate his output, and he's always going to like it because he did it to his maximum abilities. So we need some better system for the evaluation.
Yeah, we need a senior.
Yeah, a human in the loop is the only one we have right now. But then it slows down everything, right? Like if everything needs to be verified by a person, then
it does.
The automation is not that effective. Maybe we need like outsourced layer of human verifiers.
But I think that's still like a intermediary step. Like I feel like AI should get to that point where it can do it itself. I just think at least right now it may need more work than we are willing to put into it to solve this problem. And it might be better to just wait for a better model, right? Like GPT-6 or whatever, Opus 6, Fable 6.
That doesn't seem to be getting much better. Seems like the benchmarking is working well. Yeah, but at least like copywriting, coding, I don't know.
Yeah,
it's not a big progress.
At the same time, they're getting more expensive.
And slower.
Speaking of some models getting more expensive, others getting much cheaper, we have this news. OpenAI reduced the price of Luna by 80%. So that's a huge cut. Why do you think they made this cut? Like, I'm sure it's some competition issue. Do you think it's the Chinese models that they are worried about, or why? Why would they reduce it instead of just?
I think they're worried about losing market share, right? That if you have so many cheaper alternatives that essentially deliver the same outcomes, a lot of companies will, they would be happy to switch to someone else. And you can already see it. I think the data were that around 50% of all the tokens in startups in the US these days are from Chinese open source models. So it's already happening. And I'm pretty sure they see it. And the trend currently is that everyone's more price cautious. So it's basically protecting market share. But they're already losing quite a lot of money. So I'm not sure how that's going to work out with their bottom line.
Here's why I don't think this strategy will work unless they make some changes. Because basically they are lowering the price on their low-end model, and everyone knows this. Nobody really wants to use Luna. We want to use, the Sol or whatever is the highest end one, especially because the Chinese ones are comparing themselves against the high-end ones. So they're saying, Kimi K3 is like Fable level or, GPT 5.6 level. So like, will you convince those people to use Luna instead of the Chinese model? Probably not, right? Unless they build like, UX kind of way. Like make it so, for example, you do a task, you request a task from the AI, and it uses both models. Like it uses Sol and then uses Luna for implementation. But it should do it on its own. Like it shouldn't be like a technical issue you need to set up or like figure out. And then if the user sees that, oh, now I have much less usage, it's much cheaper for me, I can just use it on a $20 plan, then that's fine. Like they can compete that way against the Chinese models. But if they're just kind of leaving to the user, oh, just use Luna, it's much cheaper, I don't think most, are really excited about that.
Cost per token is only one indicator, right? It's like the cost per task to actually accomplish something is much more important. I remember seeing a chart where I think it was Opus 5, and they were essentially using like 50 times more token than the Chinese models to accomplish the same task. So even if the cost was the same, it would still be 50 times more expensive. And that's something that companies really need to look at, not just the price per token, but price per task and price per outcome.
And I think they will look at it. I believe the main, benchmarks to the artificial intelligence or artificial analysis, I think it's called, now has this where they're kind of saying the most attractive quadrant or something like that. So which models are in this attractive quadrant where they have like low cost per task, like best value, basically, best value models. And like Grok 4.5, for example, is in there, one of the best ones, but there are a few others. But yeah, definitely the Anthropic models tend to like lose by a big margin.
I also remember seeing some charts of people fine tuning their models, and then essentially the intelligence ranking overtook every leading model, yet it stayed at a low price. So you, let's say, increase the intelligence of the model by 40% just by fine tuning it on your specific use cases, but the costs stay the same. So maybe that's going to be another unlock, how people can get to better cost per task.
Yeah, I think especially as we get better tools that can automatically route between these models, I think it's just going to become a lot more appealing to use these fine-tuned models for specific tasks, especially if the AI can kind of figure it out on its own. Like right now, right, we have the skills in our AI tools, AI apps, and it kind of knows which one to pick up. Sometimes maybe you still need to mention it, like use this skill, but a lot of times you can kind of know on its own. Like I feel like it will be that way with like models as well.
The only challenge is it needs to be smart enough to pick the right model. Because sometimes you can have a workflow that you really depend on, and the model somehow one day decides to switch to the lowest intelligence one, and then you have like a huge decay on your performance, and you need to monitor, right? Like, so it's easy to miss, and if you really don't have good observability set up, 6 months down the road you realize that your financial reporting is being run by Luna, and it's not anything up.
That actually happened to me when I was using Open Router's auto mode like a year or so ago. Basically switched to, I think it was GPT-5.0 Nano or something like that, like one of their, lowest cost models. This was like, suddenly my agents were like, saying nonsense. What was going on? And then when I look at the usage on Open Router, I saw like, 50% of the usage was by that model, the GPT-5 Nano or whatever it was called. So yeah, I've definitely seen that can be an issue.
I mean, you can't leave it up to AI. Like you need to somehow control which model is being used. Otherwise, you will end up like that. Like, 12 months down the road, your financials were done by Luna, and you will be very surprised with your financial year.
So going into these like open source, open way models, the new Chinese one like DeepSeek V4 Flash, the latest version, which got much cheaper all of a sudden, and also Qwen 3.8 Max was released. I don't know if you got a chance to get more information on that. I haven't really looked at Qwen 3.8 myself. I know it was like Qwen used to be like one of the better models out there, the open weight models.
Yeah, I haven't had chance to test it yet. It's scheduled for this weekend, so I will report back with my findings. But if anything, the benchmarks look really good. I'm not sure if you've seen it. They also had interesting advertising around their new model. They were essentially... Yeah, they essentially had the model running tasks and people, doing some pleasure activities like playing tennis and rock climbing. So they try to position themselves as the company who helps you accomplish your tasks while you can live your life, which is nice contrast compared to some companies who basically say that you will get fired and die with starvation.
Yeah, the Chinese seem a lot more positive about the AI revolution, right? Compared to the Western world.
Maybe they asked their AI to do the PR for them, not just guessing it. So they had some better loops. But these models are promising. So we need to test it and evaluate it. But again, it's like the next step, right? Like it's a little bit cheaper, a little bit smarter. And if we keep going for next 6-12 months, we're going to be in a place when intelligence is really too cheap to meter.
It doesn't look like China wants to block these, high-end models either right now. So it seems they're going like, full force ahead, which also makes the US think more about like, we should lead with our own open source models. I'm not sure they have the right incentives for that. At least I don't really see like OpenAI or Anthropic do this. Maybe Google will do it, although they have a pretty big financial interest in Anthropic as well. Like they have an investment there. And I think there was even a report that about like half of their profits in a quarter were just from the stock going up for Anthropic. So they probably don't want to like commoditize Anthropic models too soon. Maybe Grok, we're hoping for that. We'll see maybe some, NVIDIA, someone else will actually lead with these open source models that they release.
Maybe Anthropic won't have any other choice one day, right? When the models are really as good as they are for a tenth of the price, they need to figure out a business model that makes more sense than just like saving their model behind API doors.
Yeah. We'll have to see. But another interesting story, the Prime Agent harness scored 95% on the RKGI 3 benchmark using Opus 5, which also was a winner before this in terms of like comparing individual models on this benchmark. It got 30% on the same benchmark. So RKGI is a benchmark where they basically create new games for humans that humans could play, and then ask AI models to finish them, right? To complete them. So it's new games the AI hasn't seen before, and they need to finish them. So what this Prime team seem to have done is they used a few different things compared to what others have done before, which is code execution. So I think before the AI models, when they benchmarked on this benchmark, wouldn't use code execution. So this probably made it like much more efficient. Maybe you understand more about this. The other thing is they gave it persistent memory. And also self-improvement. So it could learn from other games it finished in the same benchmark and like build patterns and whatnot. It became much better. It basically saturated the benchmark, like it almost finished it completely. It's a very interesting development. And I think we're going to see the AI labs build more of this stuff into their own like harnesses and models by default, right? In order to complete more of these tasks. Because the RKGI benchmark was supposed to be something that only humans can do, or something humans are much better at than AI. But now it's getting saturated.
It seems like they're really benchmarking and trying to optimize for all these benchmarks. But this one is good to see, especially since it was considered being one of the hardest, that it's slowly moving forward. And maybe it also shows that the model is just one part of it, and the actual harness is as important as anything, because that's where you can build self-learning memory.
Yeah, at the very least, I expect other companies using harnesses like this or these improvements to like improve vision or the way the tasks are done. So maybe we'll see lower cost per task, right, from the new models because of this type of improvements.
We will see how it translates to real world. So far we struggle with seeing the benchmarks going up and translation to real work being connected, but hopefully this could be a signal that could change.
Yeah, I would agree. At least this year, we've seen Opus 4.7, 4.8, and so on 5. Some of the new GPT models. There was an improvement in some ways. Like for example, Opus 4.8 brought a pretty big improvement in front-end development, like design. I felt this for building presentation decks, slide decks. Like I could finally use an AI to do like a usable presentation just through AI, right? Just feed it the content for each slide, which I did with ChatGPT, but then make the presentation with Claude, and I was quite happy with it. And I got feedback from other people saying, it looks quite nice. So that was like the first time I could do something like that with an AI model. So there are some improvements, but yeah, it does seem like in a lot of tasks, it's going backwards, and it's probably because they are benchmarking.
They are really over-optimizing. And it's like in any software development. Like you build version 1 and it has like 5 different features. You build version 2, it has 10 features, and your users really like it, right? Because it gets better, smarter. But at some point, it peaks. Like at version 50, when you have 126 features, like adding 10 more, it just clutters the user experience, clutters the feature set, and people don't know how to use it, and it has very little benefit, if not making your software usage worse. So maybe the same pattern is here, right? That you can keep optimizing to a certain level, and then pushing it further is kind of holding you back, and it's not going to push you any further than you are.
Another story that does seem like a real improvement in the MCP protocol that agents use to communicate with apps and control them seems to have gotten a major upgrade, right, under the Agentic AI Foundation compared to when it first launched. It's now finally secure. I remember a lot of people complaining about like not being a secure protocol before. What do you think about this news? Are you happy with it? Do you think it got like, finally something that we were expecting from it?
Honestly, the first version of MCP it felt very over-engineered and very complex to build and use for what it is, essentially connecting remote tools to your AI agent. So this seems to simplify the building process, the deployment, and I personally think it's going to lead to more companies implementing it and expanding its functionality just because it becomes simpler to integrate with your tools. It's a really good protocol, how to connect to external services. But the way it was built originally, it was just too complex. And honestly, we did a couple of MCP servers, and it was just so over-engineered for what it was. And this seems to put it back into nice and smooth development. So I'm quite excited to see what companies build with that.
So how fast do you think it will get adopted by everyone? Like, do you think the AI companies will put like a 3-month, 6-month deadlines and say, the other one will be deprecated and like start using this one? Or do you think it will take years for everyone to switch?
I'm not sure what the compatibility is, if they are going to be retiring the previous generation or it can live on while you slowly migrate. At the same time, all these companies seem to be quite early adopters. So if there is a new protocol and it has obvious benefits, being simpler, easier to maintain and build on, like they have all the incentives to switch to it. So from that perspective, the transition should be pretty fast and in next 1 or 2 months.
I'm actually surprised that some companies still don't have MCP support, or at least very limited MCP support. Like, for example, Snapchat.
It was really terrible to build it. Like, I'm telling you, like the experience and the way it works under the hood, it wasn't the nicest. It's always like the version 1 of any product. People are trying to figure it out, what's the best approach. And version 2, we kind of have a little better understanding. So I think now is the time when companies start integrating it better.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Hopefully things will become better in this area. OpenAI reached 1 billion active users, twice as fast as Facebook, which is interesting, in almost 4 years. That seems like a big milestone for OpenAI. Like, it's something that could help their IPO, for example, which got pushed to like next year, I believe. But they still kind of struggle, right, in terms of revenue, profitability. So it's a nice milestone. They can now, brag with it, and maybe it will help them to help their brand kind of stay in the mainstream, because kind of like Facebook said, like everyone was saying, oh, Facebook has 1 billion users or 2 billion users. So, it was hard to even think about competing with it, right? So maybe AI will have kind of that, this will have that kind of effect as well for OpenAI, at least for a little while.
They just need to figure out how to monetize that 1 billion of users. Because right now I don't remember the exact statistic, but majority of people are on a free plan. So it's essentially costing them money to serve them. And I also think a lot of people are using it for like just a replacement for search, right? You ask a simple query, you get an answer, and that's it. So it's going to be hard to monetize that type of users unless you really want to start serving ads, which we actually see starting right now. So maybe that's going to be the model they decide to go with.
They will have to. And I think that's fine, as long as they get the investment they need to, continue improving the tools and the models and everything. It's probably fine. And I think it's only a small percentage, probably less than 10%. I just remember a statistic saying that only 0.3% of the world population uses like a $20 plan or higher. So
that's surprising, to be honest. I don't know. Yeah. I've been on the paid plan for last 3 years, since 2023. So
I've been on multiple paid plans for years.
It's interesting that people don't see enough value to pay for it. That's kind of an interesting insight if you think about it.
Yeah, we may be thinking, we're ahead, and we are learning like all of this. Like, I think we do benefit from being early in terms of like learning how to use these tools, even if they get much better in terms of UX in the future, like communicating with your mind with them or whatever it is. But I feel like we will get a bit better, like deep understanding of how they work and what we can expect from the outputs, right? So it helps that we are ahead, but at the same time, I guess the AI tools and AI in general is simply not practical enough. The benefits are still not quite there.
So I think to get the most value, you actually need to be quite technical. So, connecting the MCP servers, building scales, CLI, and all these little things that make it super, super powerful. Even if you use just ChatGPT on the website, or you use the app on your Mac with the work or co-work, whatever they call it, like the difference is so much bigger, right? Because you can tap into your local environment, write little scripts, perform API calls, and you just get 10x value out of it. But most people don't actually gonna ever do it. Like most people still don't know how to use Excel properly.
That's true. And our final story today, it seems that the DeepMind founder and CEO was promoting, at least that's what Google is saying, to the chairman role for DeepMind. Someone else will take his CEO role. And it seems like he was probably interested in taking more of a research science role. He actually won a Nobel Prize for the AlphaFold technology he built I think it was like to be able to simulate proteins. So it was like a well-deserved Nobel Prize there. So I think he wants to do more of that. He wants to be more of the cutting edge of what's possible with AI and like for that research role. And also we've seen that the Gemini models have fallen behind a lot, have fallen behind their own release schedule. We've seen some leaks about that. So maybe he wasn't that great as an operational leader, right? Or he was just not focused too much on it. So this is probably a good thing for Gemini.
I think if you're a top tier researcher, you also want to do something a little bit more advanced than LLMs these days. That
Exactly.
There's so much more in AI field that you can be focused on. And if money is not the motivation anymore because you've earned enough at that point, like you really want to push the frontier. And that might be the reason behind it as well, that he just wants to focus on something different than LLMs where he can make more impact. And maybe that translates to the low performance of Gemini as well, because it might not have been the biggest priority.
And related to what you're saying, it could also be the fact that we've seen Google move more into like focusing on making Gemini more efficient rather than more intelligent or more advanced, because it wants to use it for like, its own services, like integrate with Gmail and like Google search and like, be faster and all of that stuff. So that wasn't very interesting to Demis, I would assume, right? It's just using an old model, old capability, just make it more efficient. It's probably not that interesting to him.
Yeah, I don't think he wants to spend his time making models 20% more efficient and not pushing the frontier. And even for Google, right? It's like it's better if that type of person works on the bleeding edge.
Yeah, and he's also working on, I think it's called isomorphic. It's like longevity, type of company they're doing. It's funded Alphabet's own company, so it's in the whole Alphabet group, and he's leading that as well. I'm sure we'll get some interesting stuff from that, in the next few years in terms of like health and how AI can improve health for humans.
That sounds more interesting than a better chatbot, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure. So that was all for today. Thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you next week.
See you in the next one.